I remember I was on your show a little bit after this had really started to take off and have success. It was early 2021, and it made like $900,000 in 2 months.
Jesus.
And this.
Welcome back, everybody, to Be the Trader. Today is going to be a great day. I'm here in Ohio visiting a good friend of mine who's been on the show before, and a lot of you all are going to be like, where the hell have you been? It's Tim Grittani, and Tim, thanks for being back, brother.
Oh yeah, man. It's good to meet you in person.
I know, right? We've talked so many times online through Zoom and so forth, and finally be able to see you face to face. Like, I'm super excited for this.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you being like open and having us here.
Of course, man. Yeah.
So I know people are probably just thinking like, what have you been up to? Because it's been a while since you've posted anything. So we're very curious on just where you've been, how you've been, and what are you really focused on right now?
Yeah, well, as far as what I'm really focused on right now, I mean, family's got to be the number one thing. Like, I think that, I really kind of wound things down around the time that we decided we were going to have our second kid. And that was a little bit after the pandemic started. I traded through the first half of 2020. I was, in front of it like every day. Had a crazy, almost 1-year-old at the time running around. And it was a lot. It was a lot to, both try to keep, a baby happy during the day and also try to trade during that kind of environment.
Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, and so, with that environment, there came so many opportunities, and things went really well for the first half of the year, but I was just like so mentally drained. And I had been for a while at the point where it was like, I'm kind of burned out. Like, yes, I'm making money, but like I'm spending my entire day in front of the screen. And, at the time living in Puerto Rico, just being like, I'm in Puerto Rico and I never go outside. I never like go to the pool. Like it starts to feel like a waste at a certain point. Like, like time is your most valuable asset. And it's like, I'm making some money with my time, but like, is that the most important thing? So we decided we wanted a second kid, and seeing how difficult it was with one, I just kind of said like, smartest decision here is let's just step away. Like, let's focus on family for a while. And, as in the past when I've taken breaks for a little while, it was like a little tough with like a lot of FOMO. And then, once you get away from it a little while and you disconnect a bit from the market, then it's a lot easier to just kind of relax into it and just be like, okay, yeah, this isn't so bad. And now being at the point where I probably could get back to trading a bit if I wanted to, I haven't really felt a huge urge.
Yeah. You said a couple of things I want to hit on.
Yeah.
The first thing is, in 2020 when you were trading, it was in a hot environment. You also had a little one, roaming around the house, and you were roaming, I say, but more so you get to take care of, right? And help. And you obviously you have a wife who helps you as well.
Oh yeah, huge help for sure.
Absolutely. But I really want to know, because there's people out there who are trading and they're in that environment where they have a little one, right? How was that, trading with a little one and trying to stay focused? Like, what was the difficulty like? What was it like? Because there's a lot of people like me, I don't know what that's like, right?
Yeah.
And so very curious for those who are out there who are trying to do that, like, what do you suggest for them, or what were you going through in that moment?
Yeah, so there were a few sides to it. Honestly, the side of it that was probably the easiest would be like if I just gave one of my screens to my son and was like, okay, here, watch this video on this screen, sit on my lap, and I'll trade on the other 2 screens.
Yeah.
That was always pretty simple, but at the same time, with a 1-year-old, you don't want to like have them in front of a screen for hours at a time. So there was kind of a limited capacity to do that. I think the most challenging times would be like, if you could hear, the kid was like kind of having trouble in the other room or something, like upset about something, and like, yes, like my wife is more than capable and she's on it, but like my situation was a bit unique because I was already, very successful as a trader. It was like, how much do I really need to make, a few $1,000s today? Like if I hear trouble in the background, like my instinct is like, okay, I want to, go assist with that, depending on the severity of how serious it sounds. So it was just, you feel very torn in your duties, where it's like, okay, like, yes, I feel like I could be working, and at the same time, I really feel like I should be helping and, being present during the day.
Hey, we wouldn't be able to do these face-to-face interviews if it wasn't for our sponsor, Cobra Trading. So if you can just give them a few seconds of your time, we'd really appreciate it. Cobra Trading is the go-to broker for day traders and short sellers. And I'm not the only one saying this. In fact, Benzinga awarded Cobra Trading as the go-to broker for short selling. They have a heavy focus on direct market access order routing, so you have the fastest execution. They have some of the best locate prices and availability. They also have amazing customer service. I've experienced many different brokers, and it's why I use them every single day and why I'm proud to have them as our sponsor. Sign up now by clicking the Be the Trader referral link below and earn 1 free month of software with Cobra and 25% off all commissions. Now let's get back to the show. So it sounds like, I mean, no matter what, though, there's that fight and that balance. It's like, it's kind of challenging. No matter, I mean,
Yeah,
I know you have
finding
success,
balance is
but it's
very
still
difficult.
challenging to do that. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned just how very important that you're realizing more and more that time is more important to you.
For sure, yeah.
Can you explain just a little bit more about what you mean by that? Because you said you spent so much time in front of the computers. What does that mean? Because like for some people that might mean you're only spending, they may assume yet you're spending just the morning. Or like, what do you mean by you're spending all day?
Yeah, so especially, I mean, this is probably true for, you know, early on when my first son was born, but also beforehand, before I even had kids. Like my day for trading
Sure.
would be like all day in front of the screen. Like I like literally like 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. And then if I was holding positions overnight in listed stocks, then I'm worrying about them until 8 p.m. when after hours closes. Like I had experiences where I'd go play tennis or something after market hours and then look at my phone and there'd be an offering then something I'm long and just be like, oh my gosh. So there was like, you know, it's 12 hours a day and you really can't disconnect. And if it was a busy day, like there'd be some days where I didn't even get up to like get lunch. But where it really was wearing on me was the slow days where I'd still be kind of strapped in with such a sense of FOMO that like, yes, I probably could have gotten up and walked away and gone down to the pool, but I would choose to sit there and watch my scanner in case there's an afternoon breakout. And that just kind of had a cumulative effect where it was kind of like, what am I doing? Like, why can't I detach? I'm a very all in or all out kind of person. And I have tried to trade in a limited capacity before where I try to just only show up here and there for the good stuff or show up for an hour a day.
Yep.
And there are times I can make that work, but there are also times where it just leads to massive frustration because I feel like I'm making either uncharacteristic mistakes or I'm making a decision based off of, oh, well, I don't really want to be here, so let's just get out of the position. And then, I watch it work out. So again, it's just about finding balance. And for me, balance was very hard to achieve.
So instead, you just took a step back for a while. How long did you kind of like take a step back? What do you mean like a step back? Like completely didn't trade at all for months at a time, a year? Or how's that look?
Yeah, so when we got pregnant with our second son, I pretty much just disengaged completely. Aside from algo work outside of market hours. And that was kind of a transition that I chose to make because I said, okay, I could still keep a little bit of connection with the market, but I can do it outside of market hours. Where I can work on these strategies that will hopefully trade automatically and do a good job. And then during the day when the kids are awake, I can be present and be helpful and not be so worried about what is the market doing today. And I still have my times where I'll pop in. It took a while, but really like this March was the most involved I got in 2 years where it was, all the oil stocks going nuts. And I said like, okay, like this looks really special. I need to be involved in this. And in the span of a couple weeks, had some really nice longs on the oil stocks. But then at the same time, once all the oil stuff died down, I kind of got hooked again a little bit where it was like,
Gotcha.
okay, well, I'm going to pop in for today's gapper. And then, I'll check the scanner every morning again. And I started to kind of get roped back in a little bit. And then I was doing it on that part-time basis where like I know I'm just going to be longing something and trying to like put in a stop and walk away.
Yep.
Or in some cases, I didn't really put in a stop. I started to get sloppy and make uncharacteristic mistakes. And I was also pushing size a bit because I was saying like, okay, well, I know that I'm not going to be trading much, so let's try to have bigger opportunities on the ones I'm here for. So it was a little bit of a mental slippery slope. But yeah, you know, I'd say maybe once a week I'd like open up my E-Trade account and take along. But I've done like no personal short selling really. Or that's not true. I took one OTC short like 3 weeks ago. But other than that, like that was probably my first short in a personal account in a year at least.
And when you say personal, because I wanted to go into this in a minute.
Yeah.
But I want to say it for just a little later, the algo trading.
Yes, yes.
But because you also mentioned something about the whole idea of you would find yourself at your computer at the beginning of your, at the beginning you'll be there all day. Mm-hmm. And then even on days when it was slow. And then you would, over that time period, my question that came up is the idea of, did you ever like kind of look at your stats and be like, hey, you know, this part of the day is not profitable for me, or this part of the day, even though I make money, it's like a small percentage than this part of the day? Did that ever help you?
I never did really break it down for me or for myself based off of time of day. I kind of had my perceptions, which was that it didn't really matter. I wonder if I had put that to a spreadsheet or something, how that would have looked, because I know perception versus reality can be, you know, very different things.
Absolutely.
But I felt like, you know, I had my morning setups, I had my afternoon setups. Like I never really felt like there was like a weak time of day for me.
What about someone who's just now coming into the game and they're in your situation right now? They're brand new though, right? Like they have 2 kids.
Oh yeah.
They're young and they're trying to get into trading. Can you paint the reality of how difficult that could be? And what you might need to do to even make it? You know what I'm saying?
I can't even imagine. Like it'd be like there's so many different sides to learning trading. I mean, of course, like those outside of market hours times are, I think, going to be some of the most important. Like part of what has helped me with, you know, doing my algo stuff after the kids go to bed is that I'm a night owl, so I can very easily stay up till, you know, 1 a.m. and function the next day. Yeah. So I really take advantage of my nighttime hours to try to get some work done. So. I mean, yeah, if I was coming into it fresh as a new trader, that would probably be my primary focus. Like, let's really look at the data side of things. Let's try to track setups. But I think I'd also really miss out from that screen time during the day, you know, watching the patterns play out in real time. So that would be where the real challenge comes in. So I don't know. It'd be really essential to have a good support system in place, you know, whether it's like, oh, the kids can go to daycare or there's a lot of family in town and, you know, grandma and grandpa can take the kids for a day, stuff like that.
And then what I'm seeing here is it's not easy.
Oh, definitely not.
Like
no.
it's so I want everyone who's watching this to understand, like, don't beat yourself up, right? Because it can be so hard already.
Like I learned trading under the best of circumstances, you know, and it still took me 9 months. Yep. So, I mean, and then that's the other side of it, the financial side. Like, how long can you take to learn to trade and, you know, possibly not have income while that's going on?
Exactly.
So, yeah, there's a lot to consider.
And if you have spouse involved, like making sure they're on the same page, like that, all that can be very difficult. And I also want to ask you just the idea of when it comes to, because you brought up algo trading a couple of times now.
Yeah.
That has been your new focus, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you explain when you first started doing algo trading, what you thought it was, and then what it is to you now?
Sure. When I first started it, the idea definitely wasn't let's completely take over my trading with algos. The idea was more like, hey, I've got this Roth IRA. Like let's try to just find something that can average a couple % per trade and just kind of slowly grow that. And it was just supposed to be a gapper strategy. Like just buy, you know, find a big green candle, you know, on a NASDAQ daily, and, you know, if back test this, try to find something that has some odds to maybe gap up the next day. And I tried to put this into place, and you know, it takes a while to get all the logic sorted out and get everything firing like it should. Yeah. But then I really underestimated the reality of slippage. And some brokers are better about this than others. You know, like the brokers where you can direct route to like market makers, I think you're going to have a lot less slippage. But then if you're doing it in places like, you know, like Thinkorswim, where you're just like, you know, smart routing. Like, I really saw some bizarre delays in how long it takes in order to get filled at market open.
Gotcha.
And the slippage, like, you know, I think I succeeded in finding something where it's like on paper, this looks like you'll make, you know, 1 to 2% per trade, but when you actually try to trade it, even in good liquidity stocks, I'm getting slippage to the point where it's just break even at best. And then that market can be so streaky. You go through times where there's tons of gappers. You go through times, much longer times usually, where it's ice cold. So mentally, I was just like, this is terrible. This isn't making money on paper. This is stressing me out. So then I decided to try to make it more legit. And it kind of just evolved. Like, okay, let's try to automate some long strategies. And then I was having trouble with the longs, and it was like, okay, let's try to automate some short strategies. And I've made like every mistake you can make along the way, and ultimately settled in a place where a lot of my strategies aren't really so true to how I personally trade, but more just like straight off of a data sheet. Like, okay, like let's take this strategy and give it a really wide stop and go for more like 1-to-1 risk reward. Just one shot enter, one shot exit, and it will either work or it doesn't. And it's been profitable. I feel proud that it's been profitable, but it's hard to, have been the trader that I was and look at how this thing trades and how different it is, and it just kind of like disgusts me at times.
Yeah.
It's just like, really? That just took like a 30% loss on that? Like,
So what is it, to give people who don't have a clue of what algo trading is, right? Can you explain just what is like the basics of like what they should look at to get an understanding of just what really algo trading is? Because I know some people just think it's just like a robot computer system just doing stuff for you, making you money, right? So could you explain, like, if someone wants to learn more about that, like what route they should take or what they should look into just to get a better foundation?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, the whole thing's impossible if you can't code or you don't have somebody for you that can code.
Like you have someone.
I do, yeah.
Okay.
In my case, I made friends with somebody in Puerto Rico who came from the crypto world, and he had already been doing a lot of coding and automating. And after we'd been friends for a while, then I kind of was like, hey, do you think you might be able to help with this? And he was very interested, so I wound up hiring him on. And he's been incredible the way he's tackled problems and solved them. If I could go back and start it all over, the first thing I would have focused on would be back testing, because we really neglected that from the start, which was a huge mistake. Like a lot of our long strategies, they ran into trouble because we put together trackers first, where it was like, oh, at the end of the day, let's spit out this spreadsheet that shows us all the daily breakouts that happened today.
Yep.
And then, once that list got big enough, it was like, okay, how can we optimize this and try to cut out a bunch of the losers and only trade the winners? And, of course, that's not going to happen. You're never going to hit even close to 100% on everything. But the problem was we gathered all this data during a very hot market environment.
Yes.
And I was aware of that. I thought I knew the reality of it, which was like, okay, of course it's not going to keep up at this rate, but when things cool down, it will just be less plays, or it will be more like break even, or there'll be these long quiet periods. And instead what happened was when it cooled down, there were a ton of fake outs. And I hadn't really expected that, where it was, spike into breakout level, barely break it, and then fade all day and stop me out. And so I remember I was on your show a little bit after this had really started to take off and have success. It was early 2021, and it made like $900,000 in 2 months.
Jeez.
And it was taking 50K positions. So
yeah, okay.
If it buys a breakout, it was always buying 50K worth of stock, and then basically selling at the open the next day as long as it didn't get stopped out, because it was also a really crazy gapper environment.
Yep.
And so I knew it was nuts, and I did not expect it to continue like that. But then instead of breaking even after that, or being choppy after that, it just bled off week after week. Like, I can't even remember how many red weeks in a row it had.
Yeah.
And then this was right around the time that my second son was born. So I was just kind of content to be like, okay, I'm just going to leave it and trust that the market will stabilize, and trust that it will kind of come back and things will, get more stable. 2021.
And I know when you had that 2 months of really good success.
That was early 2021,
then, Then it started to die out in 2021?
It did, March. Gotcha. There or late February even. There was a huge shift in the market, late February, early March, where all the breakouts stopped working. And we were playing afternoon breakouts too, not just major daily ones. But it bled itself back down to, I want to say, about 100K. So it gave back $800,000 in 6 months, maybe it was.
Okay.
And I really tried to just like sit on my hands and be like, let's just try to trust like a big body of data. But then I was also, it took me too long to recognize like all the data I have is only from the hot market. Like I don't have the data on daily breakouts from 2019, 2018, 2017. Like maybe this is closer to the reality than I thought. And it also identified for me that there was kind of like a big disconnect between the algo logic and how I personally trade, because, you know, all those previous years, like breakouts was like one of my core strategies. Like I had something going on in my head where I could say like, oh, I love this breakout and I hate this breakout.
Yeah.
And the algo didn't have that. It was, you know, it was just
experience.
Exactly. So I had to kind of go back to the drawing board and say like, okay, longs aren't what I thought they were, and man, they're so much more market dependent than I thought they were. At least, at least when it comes to algos. And then I tried to tidy them up a bit and just really struggled with it. So then I said, okay, let's shift attention to shorts.
And how's that been?
Shorts have been more consistent for sure. I think there's such a natural edge in extended shorts.
Can you tell everyone what cap world are you in right now?
Mostly small cap.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just make sure.
Really it mainly looks at extension if it's going to trade a stock. So, you know, most of what's going to get really extended on a daily chart is going to be small cap, but you do have the listed stocks from time to time.
GameStop, AMC.
Yeah, GameStop, AMC. Yeah. And so anyway, I think this all started with talking about back testing, and again with the shorts, for a while we did not have good back testing in place.
But even your own strategy, I mean, you traded shorts for years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of in your head, right? I mean, with back testing, if you will.
Yeah, and like I said, I kind of built this all out so that it'd be like a lot wider of stops than I normally would personally use. You know, just more like try to be right, you know, a high percentage of the time. And because of, you know, my experience and some of my intuition of like what makes a good play versus what makes a bad play, I think it was a little bit easier with the shorts to narrow down which ones we should be targeting. Like, you know, for multi-day runners, for example, you know, the data later confirmed this, but I already kind of thought it was like, you know, looking at the previous day, you know, like the more range, the better, basically. Like, you know, it makes sense, right? But like, you know, if you got a stock that's up, you know, in 5 days, 200%, like, it's really going to be a better performing short day if a lot of that move came in the last day versus being like more evenly spread out amongst, you know, the 4 or 5 days that it ran.
And typically those stocks, if it's even spread out, you have so many levels of support.
Exactly. So much choppiness. Yeah. I mean, once we got back testing in place for the shorts, that kind of helped take it a little bit to the next level, because I had to do a lot of it by hand initially, where then I would go to something like Spakit and I would download a bunch of data, and I would just, you know, like the data I'd download would just be like, you know, let's find something where today's high was up more than, you know, 75% past the 4-day low or something like that. And then to start going through those charts one by one and saying like, okay, what may have triggered a play, and, you know, how did it perform? And it was a very tedious by hand process. It was much nicer when we could automate that.
How much time would you say you have to put in to create an algo that actually works?
I mean, I haven't even had to deal with the coding side, and just trying to think about the logic side of it. I've put in so many more hours than I ever expected. I don't even know if I could guess. It's really funny looking at it through that lens, where it's like, I've worked so hard on this and put so much time into this, and yes, it's profitable, but I like, you know, I feel like it's performed a lot worse than I would if I had just been trading. But at the same time, you know, maybe the fact that, you know, it has these stops built in, it's forced to stop out, like maybe it saved me from a catastrophe. I don't know. Like,
it's true.
I'd like to believe I would have traded everything well, but then at the same time, you know, when you factor in, by the way, I'd be trading, you know, with 2 kids and sleep deprived and definitely not at my best self, like, there's a lot more room to do something dumb in there.
Yeah, 100%, man. And you've mentioned something earlier. You said, and 2 things hit my mind. When you said 2001, the algo did really well, and then you had a theory in your head like things wouldn't be as well, but it'll even out, and then it was a little bit worse than you thought. But then you also mentioned something early in the conversation, and both of the things you mentioned made me think about 2 things, or one thing really, and that was the idea of, I really want to ask you this. Yeah. You've been trading a lot longer than I have, and what year did you start?
I would have started in 2012 full time, but I really started in 2011.
Great. Yeah. So since then, how many traders, and no names are needed, okay? But how many traders have you met that have done really well, Gaetani? Okay? Done really well, and they're no longer here.
Oh, and they're no longer here.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it does happen. I mean, I've only been trading for like 4.5 years, and I'm not even nowhere near you guys' level, but I've met people like you guys, and they're no longer here.
Right.
So, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you know, the stories of Jesse Livermore, but that's reality. Yeah. Would you say you met some like that?
I definitely have met some. Yeah. There was one that I basically mentored. And
Oh, really?
I watched him make about $500,000, and then it evaporated. Like that was rough to go through. And to be honest, I kind of like walled myself off a bit from, the community and really talking too closely to people a bit after that, because it was like I almost didn't want to be exposed to, like that side of things.
Yeah, sure.
Like a lot of I think it's been a weakness of mine, honestly, like making, real connections within the community. I've always kind of been a little more lone wolf. Like I'll meet people at conferences. I love meeting people. But I always kind of like keep a little bit of a like healthy distance where I'm happy to give you some like advice, but I don't want to get like too involved here. Like, and also just like, the time it takes to like, try to invest in somebody else's education, like one-on-one like that.
Oh, geez, it takes a lot of time, man.
Yeah.
And a lot of what you do and what I'm learning over time for myself is like the screen time. It's like so important because it's also what your subconscious picks up so much.
Yeah.
That you're not actively saying, oh, now I've learned this, but your subconscious is learning all of this. And then when you said earlier, your algos would do things that you normally probably wouldn't do, and you do better. It's because like you would see things differently from your subconscious point of view. And I think you can't really teach that. Like you got to absorb over time.
And that's what makes the algo side so hard. And like I was talking to you a little earlier about like how, like on a personal level, I'm not too happy about like how they function right now, and I want to make them more true to my style. But like every time I think about doing that, there's just like this mountain of hurdles that like would have to be overcome. Like if, like for example, if I wanted to try to put fundamentals into it, like dilution, I mean, like then we've got to put something together that basically will scrape SEC filings, and or like pull from dilution tracker. And sure, like pulling from dilution tracker might not be too hard to do like day of, but like what if I want to take it to the next level and back test this? Like how on earth do I back test years of dilution without scraping SEC filings?
Yep.
So then we have to figure out how to put all that into place, and it's like a weeks long process, and like I'm sure it's a journey worth going on. That's probably the easiest problem we have right now. Like, again, it's like you talked about, like that mental side of it, like things you can see, like when you look at a chart, like a human brain is so versatile. And I've really struggled along the way of taking what my brain sees and trying to figure out, like, how do I define what it's seeing? Like, how do you put that into code?
It's super hard. And
then back test it all. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And before I wrap this up, because I kind of cut you off and I apologize earlier.
It's all good.
You were saying that you had a friend of yours that you kind of helped, and you saw that they made a lot of money and then kind of lost it all. I just wanted to ask you, after you answered that question, is I'm sure you've seen other people, right? Who've had success and maybe for 2 years, 3 years, and then disappeared.
Yeah, I've seen some big names disappear for sure.
Right. So what would you say after experiencing that? How has your perception of trading evolved?
I mean,
like, as in, what's more important to you, or what do you think people should really take away from that?
Yeah, so I think I struggled with this as well. You just reach a point where you've got lots of success, you've made all the money you could have dreamed of when you first started, but it's not enough. It never feels like enough. You always want to push it, and that need to push it can come from a number of things. Like, some people kind of have like that, like Michael Jordan like drive where they want to like just like perfect their craft.
Yep.
Other people, maybe fall into comparing themselves to others and saying like, oh, I see so-and-so doing these ridiculous numbers. Like, there's no reason I can't achieve that. And I'm kind of guilty of that a bit. Like, oh man, I'll look at someone like Ducks and just be like, oh, I want to get there. But like it's okay to take your foot off the gas. Like with the algos, like I've been very, very deliberate about like making sure like if everything just falls apart and goes absolutely terribly with the algos, like I'm going to lose a very well-defined amount of money that like it's not going to be a dent in like, what I've made up to this point. Like I'm going to keep it all very under control. Like just the thought of putting myself in a position where I could lose, even a tenth, like really scares me. I don't want to do that. So like, I think it's okay to keep pushing yourself and, want to perfect the craft, but you've got to do it in a responsible way. And that's hard because that means it's going to take more time.
Yeah.
But Like once you've made it, you've got to think about the risks, and like that risk first mentality. I've talked about it before with like, risk first when I go into every trade, be risk first when you go into just trading as a whole.
Yes,
Yeah,
100%. And what I've learned, and just to piggyback off what you just said, is just it's not about if you made it, it's about keeping it, and it's about staying here forever, right? And what you just explained is, even if you lost the worst scenario on your algos, it wouldn't be a tenth of what, or whatever you said, of what you've earned, or it wouldn't hurt you mentally. Obviously, it'd be uncomfortable, but it wouldn't hurt, right?
Right.
And so that right there just shows how important it is that you're more focused on not what you can earn, but more of what you can lose. And that's what I really wanted to see what you had to say about that, because we'll see all these guys on Twitter, right? And they're saying, oh, I killed it, I made $1 million here, I made $1 million here, and then all of a sudden, like, they're gone. But people don't really realize that the new people who are coming in, they think that's a regular thing every single day. And the reality is it's not. Like, I get the pleasure of talking to you, man. I really appreciate it. And I talk to, people like Matt from Triforce Trader and so forth. And when I talk to these guys, like, I get to see the real reality is, like, all you guys take losses. All you guys, and you'll take some big losses. And that maybe you didn't want to take. Like, and it's normal. But what you don't do is, or what you do really well, what I've noticed is, like, you're able to, you might make a couple of mistakes, but then you're able to really start to acknowledge it and start to pivot and say, okay, I need to fix that. But look, man, I'm taking so much of your time. I'd love to wrap it up by asking you two things.
Sure.
Where can people learn more about you? And is there any place that you can give a shout out to, like, how did you learn, like, algo trading? Yeah,
okay. So as far as shout out goes, I mean, I drew a lot of inspiration from Matty, Triforce Trader, for sure. Yeah. He does things a little bit differently than I do, but like I went through his course. Like I'm not too proud to say. Yeah. And learned a lot about, like, just proper ways to, like, handle data and, like, just analyze data. So there was a lot of value there for me. Even though, we're kind of using different platforms, and, he's like in futures and stuff, and, like, all these crazy markets that I would never touch with a 10-foot pole, but, like, ideas, they translate.
100%.
And as far as where people can learn more about me, like, I'm barely active on social. If you ever have a Tim Grattani account messaging you, it's not me. I got the blue check mark now, $8 a month. So,
it's insane. Do not respond.
Right, but that's true. Like, I've seen a lot of fake blue check mark accounts already. So
isn't that insane?
Yeah, it's nuts, man.
Because they're getting people paying them. But again, look, man, I appreciate it so much. We'll have links to Grattani's actual social media below. But again, thank you so much for being here, my man.
Of course, really great talking to you.
Absolutely.